everyone. Happy Tuesday, May 23rd, 2017. Welcome to another episode of Brain Scratch Case Cracked. I'm your host, John Lorden. I know in a lot of the cases that we cover on this show, we hit a point where it goes cold, and we're usually reviewing cases that take sometimes several years, even a few decades to solve. This case is a little bit different. In this instance, the case gets cracked pretty much within one day. Let's jump right into the case of Jeffrey Locker. Jeffrey Locker was 52 years old. He was a motivational speaker, husband, and father of three. His family lived in an affluent Long Island community called Woodmere. He had co-authored a self-help book and helped people manage work-related stress in his seminars. His specialty was supporting the insurance industry. By all appearances, he was a very successful man, and he made a lot of money. On July 15, 2009, Jeffrey's wife would call him on his cell phone when he doesn't arrive at home. He tells her that he has a flat tire and some guys are helping him. After several more hours with no more contact from Jeffrey, she calls him in as a missing person. On July 16th, in East Harlem, Jeffrey was found dead in his 2007 Dodge Magnum with several stab wounds to the chest, a cord wrapped around his neck, and his hands bound behind his back. His ATM card was missing. Why was Jeffrey in a rough part of town compared to his Long Island neighborhood? Rumors began to swirl about him possibly seeking a prostitute and having been seen buying condoms, but those would all turn out to be false. His friends insist that he was a dedicated family man. Kenneth Miner was 38 at the time. He was a 6'4" ex-con who struggled with drug abuse, as well as being an unemployed computer technician and a husband. On the same day that Jeffrey died, Kenneth Miner was captured on video using Jeffrey's ATM card to withdraw $1,100 from 5 different ATMs. There was also footage of him getting into Jeffrey's car and exiting it around the time that detectives suspect Jeffrey was killed. Police captured Miner that same day, but no one could anticipate what he was going to say. Miner says he was recruited by Locker right off the street to help him commit suicide. Quote, Locker said it had to look like a robbery so his family can get what they deserve, Miner said in a written statement. Miner also states that he was in the car when Jeffrey last spoke with his wife. Initially, Jeffrey wanted Miner to get a gun and gave him $60 to find one. Miner was unable to locate one, so he called Jeffrey back to meet up with him again so he could let him know in person. Miner said he first attempted to choke Jeffrey using a section of phone wire, but the wire kept breaking. So Jeffrey then instructed him to use a knife that was in the glove compartment of the car. Jeffrey offered his ATM card and the PIN number 1322 as payment to Miner for the assistance. Now, was this all just a clever story being told by a murderer to cover up a sloppy robbery, or was there some truth to what Miner had stated? Investigators would find that Jeffrey wasn't as successful as his public persona appeared. He was steeped in debt, and he had just recently taken out millions of dollars in life insurance on himself, payable to his family. One policy for $4 million was taken out just over a month before his death. The total insurance payout would have reached approximately $18 million. They found he also had contributed to a large Ponzi scheme and was ordered to pay back $120,000 that he was paid out from it, and that he was facing more lawsuits relating to that Ponzi scheme. Investigators also found that he had been researching funeral arrangements and even emailed his wife on how to manage their assets in his absence. The question of did his family know he was going to harm himself is still unclear. The detectives that broke the news to the family noted a very strange response. No crying, no screaming, no breakdowns. Quote, it was like we were telling them something they already knew. Investigators also found another man that Jeffrey had asked to kill him. Melvin Fleming was a homeless drug addict in the Harlem area who says he milked between $4,000 and $7,000 cash out of Jeffrey before disappearing on him and not helping him actually kill himself. The attorney for Kenneth Miner offered a manslaughter plea with a max sentence of 15 years. The prosecution rejected it, opting to go for a full murder charge with a max penalty of life in prison. Miner says he simply held the knife against the steering wheel and Locker thrust himself onto it several times. This earned Kenneth Miner the nickname Harlem Kevorkian. Prosecution would call in a medical expert to testify and say that Miner actually stabbed Jeffrey as Jeffrey lay prone in the car. Miner was convicted in 2011 of second-degree murder and given a 20-year sentence. Jeffrey's wife and children did not attend any of the trial. In 2013, Miner's conviction was reversed due to the initial judge being incorrect when instructing the jury that assisted suicide was a murder charge. It's actually considered second-degree manslaughter in New York, suggesting that the original plea made by Miner's attorneys was more appropriate. The prosecutors were preparing to retry the case. However, in 2014, Miner accepted a new plea deal where he would take a first-degree manslaughter charge and in return have his sentence reduced to 12 years, with credit being given to him for time already served. He could get out as early as 2019 unless he wins an appeal, which he has filed, and I haven't been able to find any updates on. During the hearing to revise his sentence, Miner showed remorse, stating, "I had the chance to do the right thing, and I didn't. I failed Mr. Locker that night because of my own greed. I will never let that happen again." The $4 million policy was canceled by a judge who found that Jeffrey had grossly overestimated his annual income at $800,000 per year when he was making more like $225,000 per year. There were motions against the other policies he had filed, and it seems that $12 million of the 18 would not be paid out. So how did some of that insurance pay out? This is something that comes up in cases kind of frequently. There seems to be this assumption that if you take out life insurance and then commit suicide that you don't get paid. But there is actually a specific suicide clause built into most life insurance. Usually this clause states that no death benefit will be paid if the insured commits suicide within 2 years of taking out a policy. And it also states that whenever an insured person replaces an existing life insurance policy with a new one, the time clock for the suicide clause is set back to 0 and starts over again. So I do believe he had some original life insurance. He was over that 2-year period, and I do believe his family was paid out. From what I can see, it seems like about $4 million. There is a very good 48 hours episode on this. I'm going to include it in the description box below. If you want to look into this case more, I really recommend you check that out. It's going to give you a bit more backstory. It's going to tell you a little bit more about the trial, and in particular, there's an interesting fact about how the wounds were clustered. It seemed like all the wounds were within about a 6-inch circle, which some would say kind of supports Miner's version of the story. Also, Miner's legal team had sent an investigator to review the car, and the investigator noted that the horn on the steering wheel was inoperable, that for some reason it had been disabled. So they're trying to use that information to make it look like, hey, look, Jeffrey was planning this as a potential way to kill himself. He had disabled the horn, he had a knife in the glove compartment, and basically Miner was just the guy to do the work and then take a rap for it. And if there's one thing that really bothers me about this case, it's kind of Miner's actions in this, because he took an ATM card and then goes and starts using it all over the place. You know, most ATM machines have a camera on them. Even though he had the PIN number given to him, he should have figured that he was going to be filmed, that police were going to track him down, and that they were going to try to pin him with this murder. I mean, he convincingly made it look like a murder. Even the autopsy report officially concludes that it was a murder. There is an expert Dr. Cyril Wecht, who you may have heard of before, that also shows up in the 48 Hours episode and talks about the fact that with the way that the wounds are clustered, it doesn't make sense that Locker was trying to defend himself. If he would have moved at all, that it would have broken up that cluster. It would have been much bigger than a 6-inch area. I think I buy Kenneth Miner's version of the story. The only thing that hits me a little weird about it is whenever he retells it, he keeps mentioning that Jeffrey Locker told him to move the knife more to the right so that it would hit him in the heart. And if you're the person saying this, let's assume you're sitting in a car, you've got someone in the passenger seat, and you are effectively thrusting yourself against the steering wheel. From that direction, I believe you would be telling the person, move the knife more to the left. And I have seen on a few occasions where Kenneth is saying that he was saying move it to the right. So what just strikes me about that is if they were facing each other, then him saying move it to the right would make more sense. But if they're not facing each other, if they are really using the steering wheel and Kenneth is just holding it there, that direction seems flip-flopped in my mind. But outside of that, I think it's pretty convincing that Kenneth assisted in this suicide. And that really is a big part of this case, because if he didn't assist, even if someone asked to be killed and then he kills them, that could still be a full murder charge. But if it was truly assisting, the person was taking action in part with the person that was helping them, then that is where we get it down to manslaughter charges, which is where it sits right now for Kenneth. So. Another interesting spin, which once again the 48 Hours episode will take you more into, is the family's response, the family's reactions. They didn't participate in the 48 Hours episode, so you're not going to hear anything directly from them. But there's a family friend that's kind of commenting on it a little bit. The investigator is looking into their Facebook page and how quickly they had asked for the insurance payouts. And there's a really interesting tidbit about a text message that was sent from Jeffrey's son to Jeffrey, which seems to be assuming that Jeffrey isn't going to be alive much longer. I won't spoil it for you. I want you to really check out that episode if you want to know more about this case. So just know there's a lot more to see there. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Case Cracked. I hope each and every one of you is having a wonderful day. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on the Lord and Arts channel.